Inez, get the right fucking angle. It's an ad.
Gods have spoken. You need a new, clean, heavenly body wash with Native.
Tap the Get It Fast filter, and you'll be shown options available for quick shipping. This is great.
That intro is kind of hard though.
The year is 2019. You wake up surrounded by detailless concrete walls and a cold sweat. There are no decorations, no windows, nothing bar one single door and a weird object on the other side of the room. Your feet find the ground and you lift yourself from the distinctly uncomfortable bed you were seconds ago fast asleep in, surely it being a far cry from the featherbeds of your past, and you shuffle over to the other side of the room with the limp of a man without any hope or future. Your weak, feeble knees knock against the object finally, and your eyes adjust to see it. A toilet in your bedroom. Your eyes look down to see a sight not unfamiliar to anyone who spent time behind bars. A prison toilet. And in the reflection at the bottom of the water, you see a most ghastly sight. Staring back is a man with a face so wickedly evil. Epstein.
This is such an incredible creative decision to put the listener in the perspective of Jeffrey Epstein.
Wait, hold on. Wait. You wake up as Jeffrey Epstein? Is that what you're
It's like body swap. It's like one of those Nickelodeon movies.
Freaky Friday.
Yeah, Freaky Friday.
You know, I gotta say, when we decided to cover this episode, I had the thought, I'm so scared of what Jackson's gonna do for the story. This is...
Wait a minute. Okay, so that is Wendigoon. I thought so. Thought that was him. Had to check. Had to see if it was
like,
even
this
in
isn't
the
as bad as
description.
it could have been, so
The
I'll allow it.
stories, yeah, exactly.
Oh shit.
Exactly, like the stories are
Broke
like the
up
last
into
thing I do. I research
several
the case,
parts.
and then like an hour or so before the recording, I sit down and write like just shit out the story. Basically, I sat down. I'm like, fuck, what am I gonna write? what do I even do here? It's not very fun writing an introduction or a story about Jeffrey Epstein and his whole situation.
So you went with a Freaky Friday.
I pulled out my book of tropes and cliches, and I was like, Freaky Friday, that's it.
Oh my gosh.
I like that. You wake up, you're Jeffrey Epstein, you're a pedophile, now what?
I did like my creative decision of making him look down into the toilet filled with like piss and shit and seeing his own reflection there. That's how he figures out that he's Epstein. But yeah, there's nothing else there's nothing I could do really with this.
Wait, is that it? Does it end? You just realize you're Epstein?
It's just, you're Epstein now.
He doesn't die or anything? He's like, oh no.
Well, there's also the issue of putting something about unaliving within the first minute
Oh,
of
okay,
that.
fair.
But like we know where it ends. He's a man. His feeble knees were knocking against an object.
You hear all of the security cameras turn off at once.
Anyway, yeah, I didn't want to write fan fiction about this story. I'm going to be completely honest. That doesn't matter. This is the Red Thread. My name is Jackson, and this is the show where myself and my good friends Isaiah and Charlie investigate all manners of cults, cold cases, cryptids, and conspiracies. And before you say anything, yes, I know you're wondering out there, yes, there are many conspiracies surrounding the Epstein case, conspiracies surrounding those who may have benefited from Epstein's demise, and conspiracies about how he even rose to the position that he found himself in. There is plenty to explore and talk about, and we plan on exploring them all, or as many as we can anyway, in this episode of The Red Thread. I did want to, before we start, guys, though, I did want to make a quick note before we actually begin. I wanted to shout out that we are on audio platforms like Amazon and Spotify, which is perfect for your daily commute. So if you're listening on those platforms, we also have video over on YouTube. So we're on YouTube and audio platforms. You can find all the links below. That would really help us out if you subscribe on all of those and rate us as well. It would really mean a lot. And another quick note, we've kind of referenced it in the past few episodes, but a lot of writing and research does go into this show. I do spend a fair bit of time going over the information and compiling it all. And that is available below in the description of these episodes. So you're able to go fact check us, see the sources. I have a source list and all that kind of stuff. So you're able to see the information that we're kind of talking about. It's kind of necessary because there's so much information with a lot of these cases that it's impossible, at least for me, to keep it all in my head. So these documents are, I think, really necessary. So you can go down and check them out as well if you want to follow the research and all that stuff. But that's enough notes and talking about stuff that's not related to Epstein. Let's start, guys. How are you guys doing? You ready for this?
Doing great, Jackson. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it wouldn't be the same without you. You are the red thread, Charlie.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, too, for having me. There you go.
No problem.
I just have to say again, as I do every episode, Jackson, the way he does his research makes me want to give him a little forehead kiss. He's so remarkable at it. I love it. He makes me jealous of how well organized he is. That I just, as always, good job.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the forehead kisses. I'd happily be paid in that. That's perfectly fine. Are you okay with me? No, it's really, it's kind of cathartic in a way, and it really helps me, so I don't think there would be any other way of doing this, honestly. So, no worries. Where's your information level on Epstein, guys? How familiar are you with his whole history, what led up to his arrest and all that kind of stuff, how he found himself in the position that he found himself in? Like, where's your knowledge at?
I know everything about his
victims.
crimes, not so much about him as a person. Like, I don't know anything about what he did aside from, like, some financial stuff for people. I don't know how he got to that point. Like, to me, he was never even, like, a child. He was just made in a lab to be the ultimate evil pedophile. Like, I genuinely know nothing about this guy besides just being, like, one of the most evil men in modern memory.
Yeah, so you don't know anything about how he actually got to the level of power that he got to.
Yeah,
Okay,
pretty
Not
much.
really.
Isaiah, how about you?
I would say, I think I know at least all the general things there is to know about him, about like what his job was, how he got there, of course, the crimes themselves. The thing I'm most interested in looking at today is I remember when he died, like being so super engrossed in the details of it, that it kind of, like honestly got kind of depressing. The thought of like this many people who are entrusted to, keep us safe, or celebrities or what have you, are either involved or at least knew about what was going on. It kind of like, not to use a 4chan word, but it kind of black-pilled me a little bit, and like everything hurts and I'm dying type deal. So I had to like separate myself from it for a while. So I haven't looked at the details since really like the couple months after his death. So I'm interested to see what developments have been made. But yeah, I'm pretty familiar with everything leading up to, and then some of the conversation around when he died. But I'm interested to see like where the theories have gone at this point.
Right. So I think how we're going to structure this episode for everyone listening at home is I want to provide a pretty detailed timeline of Epstein. I think it's important to kind of look at where he came from, the path that he took to get the power that he finally received, and then what he did with that power. So we are going to do a pretty comprehensive timeline, and then towards the end we'll start talking about theories as well as the conspiracy surrounding his death and stuff like that. So I think that's where we'll start, is obviously at the very beginning of Epstein's life. And it was by all accounts a pretty like standard beginning to a life. He was born in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in Coney Island, modest middle-class neighborhood at the time. He born to a fairly modest family as well. Demonstrating early intelligence, Epstein skipped 3rd and 8th grade, though, due to his academic prowess. So it's fair to say that he was probably a pretty talented and smart kid, I believe. Do you guys know of anyone in your lives that have skipped multiple grades like that?
I knew one person who did.
How
But
easy is
it
that to
wasn't-
do?
I don't know if easy is necessarily the right word, but I think he did just because he could. Like, it's not something that was like a huge deal at the time. I don't know how
You kind
common
of-
it is, but I knew one guy.
You kind of have to like look for it in like middle school or elementary school, because like I know a bunch of people who did that in college, right? Like they made a 4-year degree, they did it in 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I'm pretty sure the way it works in elementary schools is like you can request to see if the child can test ahead of their grade, and if they
That
do,
makes
then they
sense.
can kind of skip lines, so to speak, because all they're looking for at that age is just like if they can pass the baseline stuff. So
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Because I don't think I've ever seen it over here. Maybe it's an American thing, but I don't think I've ever seen it over in Australia. I've definitely seen people held back.
it's rare.
I've
It's
seen
super rare.
people held back multiple years, but like never like pushed forward. But it's always something that I see in like American media and stuff, like TV shows. Like,
Yeah,
oh my god,
yeah.
this kid's so gifted. He's been pushed ahead. He's in university at the age of 14. I think that was young Sheldon, if I recall correctly.
Now there are some great stories like that. I remember there's that one kid. I think he was from Japan who was like in Harvard at the age of 13 or 14 or something like that. Like every now and then. you
Those
get
are always
something
like the
that.
prodigy,
Yeah.
the prodigy academia students.
Right. So it is possible. It does happen, but I think this does at least speak to a level of intelligence not extremely common to people around his age. Between the year, so that was in 1953, by the way. That's when he was born. He went through the schooling process, and then between 1969 to 1974, he graduated high school at the age of 16. He attended Cooper Union College in the East Village of New York City, where he studied advanced mathematics and earned money by tutoring other students. And he eventually dropped out, though, of Cooper Union and enrolled at New York University, but also did not graduate there because in 1974, now 21, he was hired as a mathematics teacher at the Dalton School, which was like a prestigious prep school in New
You
York
look like
City
you
that
got mob
catered to the
ties.
children of the wealthy. So he immediately left school, university, and became a teacher at like a prep school, basically.
Yeah,
And now he
yeah.
was rubbing shoulders with the wealthy and the elite of New York City, which is obviously where we start getting into connections immediately. So he was hired by the headmaster at the time, which is interesting. It was Donald Barr, which is the father of Bill Barr, the attorney general who served under Trump, and I think he was also like the head of what was he the head of? He was like the head of the FBI or something at some point.
I remember
Attorney
seeing his
General,
name
right?
come up. Yeah, he was Attorney General. He was something before that, though.
I know his name's come up in the past. I think he was like at least loosely connected to the Ruby Ridge incident, which was a
Oh yeah, that's where I know that guy. yeah, it rang
What's
a
the
bell.
Ruby Ridge incident? I don't know that one.
Oh no! Oh Charlie, you poor summer child.
give him a synopsis. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll give like a 30-second version. Okay, you know what Waco was, right, Charlie? Like the Waco cult compound, the Branch Davidians?
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple years before that happened, the same FBI team responded to a guy named Randall Weaver who lived up in northern Idaho. He was reported for sawing the barrels off of 2 shotguns and then selling them to an undercover agent. Anyway, the whole thing happens where that guy. yeah, it rang
What's
a
the
bell.
Ruby Ridge incident? I don't know that one.
Oh no! Oh Charlie, you poor summer child.
Give him a synopsis. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll give like a 30-second version. Okay, you know what Waco was, right, Charlie? Like the Waco cult compound, the Branch. Davidians.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple years before that happened, the same FBI team responded to a guy named Randall Weaver who lived up in northern Idaho. He was reported for sawing the barrels off of 2 shotguns and then selling them to an undercover agent. Anyway, a whole thing happens where he's supposed to show up for a court date, but he doesn't because the date got changed. No one informed him. It eventually culminates with a standoff where the FBI surrounds his property for 2 weeks. Eventually, they just start shooting over the course of everything. The FBI killed Randy's son and his wife. And then Randy was arrested for the original charge. It became this whole political storm where eventually the family sued the government and they won for damages. That FBI team, like I said, 2 years later would then go on to Waco and have another mess up. Basically, it's an example people to this day use of government overreach, government doing bad things. The Oklahoma City bomber said that the reason he did what he did was because of Ruby Ridge and Waco. So, yeah, just basically whole history of government corruption tied in.
Yeah, they stormed in and killed his family. Basically, it's just like Isaiah says there. It's just an example of government corruption, really, and not following the proper rules and it was a whole messy situation. That was Bill Barr, but in 1974, Epstein was kind of connected to, at least through his job as the mathematics teacher at Dalton School, he was connected to Donald Barr, which was his Bill Barr's father. And Donald Barr was another person with a long storied history, let's say. He served in the OSS, which was the Office of Strategic Services, which was an early version of the CIA during World War II, and he was recognized for his unorthodox approach to hiring. Known for his distinctive style, he left the school abruptly in 1974, citing, "I am not comfortable with the definition of board-head relations that I see becoming current in school systems everywhere." And by this time, Epstein had already secured his position as a teacher under Barr's tenure. So I think I included that just to show that Donald Barr was a kind of like an eclectic, old-school dude. He had his own ways of doing things, and he didn't follow like the proper rules of hiring and stuff. He just brought Jeffrey Epstein in because I don't know, he was impressed by his credentials or his history or whatever.
He just liked him, you know.
Yeah, probably.
Like Epstein was a good with numbers guy, but he also didn't have a degree. But Barr probably didn't care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I found some interesting information about Donald Barr as well, which was kind of funny. After hiring Epstein and leaving Dalton, Donald Barr went on to write the sci-fi novel Space Relations, a slightly gothic interplanetary tale in 1973.
What an interesting career change.
He went from the OSS to like a headmaster at a fucking school to writing like smut, basically. It's been described as highly unsettling due to its depiction of non-consensual sex, of enslaved people, particularly teenage girls, and other coercive sex acts.
Ew.
Oh, interesting.
No, it's all connected. It goes all the way back. No.
Maybe not the finest, gentlemen. Let's
I was about to, thank God you said that before because when you said gothic, I was going to make a joke about, haha, goth women, me and him can get along, but then you mentioned the Tina. Whew, that was a close one. Alright.
No, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, this sounds like a very bad guy.
Yeah,
also very interesting that he takes Jeffrey Epstein in under his wing and then goes on to write some very less than stellar stuff regarding the non-consensual nature of young women.
Mm-hmm.
This could be like a Star Wars situation, like an apprentice and a master.
you know, there are always two.
Yeah,
there's always two.
Maybe Epstein's coming into this world, like, not to try to remove any blame from him, of course, but maybe he's coming into this world, he starts interacting with the high elite of New York, and maybe it was people like him who eventually showed him, like, oh, well, there's an interest in this kind, I hate to say it, but in this kind of market around here. Maybe I should look more into that. So that might have been one of his early introductions into it.
Or maybe it was more simple and he was surrounded by all these rich upper class people who had their own set of perversions and stuff, and then he was groomed into that life through just being around. Maybe it wasn't a strategic decision. Maybe like their behavior just rubbed off on him, basically.
Yeah,
it's entirely possible. But really, so he went straight into this kind of world of the upper class, let's say. And 2 years later, he was let go from his teaching position. The decision was influenced by the fact that he lied about his credentials on his resume. falsely claiming to have a degree from Stanford University. Epstein admitted to fabricating this information to secure the teaching position, but before being let go during a parent-teacher conference in 1976, Epstein impressed a student's father with his mathematical abilities. So I don't know, I guess he did like division or whatever, like in front of him real quick.
Yeah, how does that happen? He goes to a parent-teacher conference and is like, alright, now check me out. Watch this math I can do.
Like a fucking magic trick. Like, oh, whoa, no way.
Whoa, I've never seen math like that.
You did it without
It's
a
like-
calculator?
It's like one of those cheesy movie scenes where he's like marking on the chalkboard real quick, and everyone's like, "Wow, whoa,
What the fuck?
Whoa.
They're flipping tables and shit. Holy shit.
this is insane! No way!"
He fucking pulls out those giant rotary phones or whatever, those giant cell phones at the time. Mark, you gotta come see this shit.
This is an
He's
outrage.
doing simple multiplication in his head.
Get down to Dalton ASAP. You're not gonna believe this.
Look what I found. Yeah, anyway, so the father recommended Epstein to Alan Greenberg, an executive at Bear Stearns. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Stearns.
It's one of those things I've read a million times. It's a giant financial. I think they went under during the 2008 financial collapse, right? Or were they bailed out? I can't remember.
I know they were involved in it. They were a big player. I can't remember if they still exist or not.
Yeah, regardless, they were one of those big Wall Street kind of financial institutions at the time. And yeah, he was Alan Greenberg, the guy that Epstein was recommended to, was the firm's eventual CEO. He was known for his interest in hiring individuals he described as being PSDs, which stands for poor, smart, and desperate to be rich. So someone desperate to get out of the middle class or the lower classes and join the upper echelon. So Greenberg had a good eye for that, I guess, and Epstein was described as fitting perfectly into that position. So this Epstein desperately wanted to be rich, and I think that's pretty obvious. Recognizing Epstein's potential as both a trader and someone who could attract clients and investors, perhaps with his mathematical skills, Greenberg took Epstein under his wing. After joining Bear Stearns, whatever, Epstein quickly became adept at cultivating affluent clients. And despite falsifying his credentials on his resume, Epstein was given a second chance and within 4 years made limited partner at the firm. So this was his real, he had been rubbing shoulders with the elite up until this point through his teaching position, but this was the break for him, really. He was now like an account man over at like a massive financial institution that dealt with rich people's finances constantly, obviously, in advisory roles and stuff like that. So he was working very closely and intimately with very rich people now, and this is when he was starting to make connections as well.
And this is what I vaguely know about Epstein, is this position and where this led him.
Mm-hmm.
The financier, yeah. In July of 1980, it says Epstein, still working as a trader, was featured as Bachelor of the Month in Cosmopolitan magazine. At 27 years old and without a college degree, he described himself as a financial strategist who only took on clients with earnings exceeding $1 billion a year. And an excerpt from the article. An excerpt from the article reads, "If you're a cute Texas girl, write this to New York Dynamo." Which, man, you want to talk about aging like milk? Wow.
Dynamo is such a hard word to use. Also, it's worth mentioning that that's exceeding $1 billion a year in the 80s.
Yeah.
That's fucking wild.
Yeah, that is wild. So he rose through the ranks very quickly. I think that shows his people skills as well. Like he must have been a very charismatic individual, obviously, to garner the positive reception with the people at Bernstein's. So to be in that position, to be dealing with people with $1 billion a year, managing their finances, stuff like that, absolutely insane. Like a meteoric rise, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely, has to be. The picture in Cosmopolitan magazine as well, I'm going to throw this up on screen. We see a young Jeffrey Epstein there in 1980. And like you said, that quote, that excerpt did not age well at all.
It's New York Dynamo.
I also want to know why, like, how famous he was at the time to be able to be put in Cosmopolitan magazine. I guess he was like the bad boy of Wall Street, maybe.
From what I understand, around the 80s, it was much more common to kind of like what's the word, chase after like the super rich stockbroker mindset. Like they were a lot more celebrity culture. Now it's
Right.
kind of flipped to where they're seen as more like
Slimy.
slimy, greedy businessmen. But at the time, it was like the thing to be.
They're
So
the
I know
rock
that was a lot
stars,
more
yeah.
common.
That makes
They were
sense,
the
yeah.
cool guys.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't consider that. So in 1981, Epstein was asked to leave Bear Stearns amid allegations of insider trading, a regular D violation for lending $20,000 to his friend Warren Eisenstein for stock purchase, which was actually for a condominium, according to Warren's widow. So that's kind of crazy that he got done in for $20,000.
Yeah.
Like that's what got him like fired from that company. Like good, obviously. He was probably breaking a lot more rules than just that. But
Yeah.
$20,000 to a friend instead of and he's dealing with like billions of dollars. That's crazy.
Those investigators were crazy. Like, you know how much they had to pour through to find $20,000 misplaced?
Well,
Like, those
it
guys
was
did a
20K
great
in the
job.
80s. That's so much more back then. That's probably something that probably would raise a few alarms.
That's
like
true.
Insider trading is always a huge deal for firms like that, I have to imagine. So then also finding the 20K, like I bet that was probably pretty substantial to them.
Well, you know what?
That
I
is
think it was a
true.
big deal for the SEC or whatever the commission was. I don't think it was a big deal for Bear Stearns, who probably does a lot of insider trading and all of these kind of financial
Oh well, yeah,
companies do.
yeah.
What were you gonna say though? I said. Sorry.
I'm saying that, no, you're good. I'm saying that's true what Charlie's saying. And what further lends credence to that is that $20,000 bought an entire condominium, or at
True,
least
yeah.
part of it, supposedly,
Oh,
right? But also, keep in mind, this is a guy who only takes clients who do over $1 billion in revenue, right? So if this guy's, managing $10 billion, 20's still got to be pretty hard to find.
Yeah.
True. Yeah,
absolutely.
You'd have to really go out of your way to find it and do a great
So,
job. of
so you know
finding
what? Hats off to the SEC.
Good job.
Good job, boys.
It is also kind of funny to me that he got done in for being a good friend. Like, this man did one good act, like friendly acts of Epstein's, and then fucking blew up his life a little bit.
Oh, well, come on. We don't know how many children were in that condo.
No.
True. Yeah, it could have been at the start of his.
Yeah, it could have just been a
Yeah.
front for
Yeah,
like more
course.
nefarious things. Who knows with Epstein? Yeah, and how the SEC found out anyway, from what I could figure, was Warren's widow was basically reported it inadvertently, I guess, through like her, I guess, what do you call it when you settle your estate and stuff like that? Probably after his
A
death.
liquidation kind of thing?
Yeah, stuff like that. So additional issues arose with Epstein's expense accounts and his involvement in an SEC investigation for insider trading linked to work for Edgar Bronfman Sr. And then Epstein left Bear Stearns carrying a box with personal items, including an award from Cosmopolitan magazine and a photo of Morgan Fairchild. So he's leaving Bear Stearns with this little cardboard box and it's just got a trophy from Cosmopolitan magazine in it.
The most esteemed award in Wall Street.
Do you think Cosmopolitan magazine's trying to like quietly shuffle this all under the rug? Like, no, we didn't give Epstein any award. Never.
I wonder if they've tried to. I guess not, but because it's kind of hard to. But maybe.
Yeah, it's also very easy for them to just be like, we had no fucking clue because nobody did.
We didn't know. We didn't know all the details about this New York Dynamo before giving him the award.
Just on a brief search, a bunch of other articles has made articles about Cosmopolitan making Jeffrey Epstein Bachelor. The Daily Beast got him covered. Business Insider. Everyone is jumping on Cosmopolitan. That's pretty funny.
So, Bernstein's boss, James Kane, also stated that Epstein left voluntarily, but other reports suggest he was forced out. So we don't know if he was forced out or he left with honor, if you will, or what. But regardless, he left. And that year, he founded his own financial consulting firm, Intercontinental Assets Group, or IAG, which is just the fucking dumbest name ever. Where's the passion with these names? They come up with such lame names. Sounds like such a boring corporation. He operated out of his small Upper East Side apartment, and he focused on advising hyper-rich clients on financial matters despite initially lacking clients. He shifted his company's focus to recovering money from fraudulent brokers and lawyers, attracting high-profile clients like Andrew Levender, who was a famous lawyer, and Robert Gold, famous researchers. So I believe he kind of still had these connections going on from leaving his previous position at Best Earns, and utilize those connections to get whatever he could in his own company, which makes sense.
In 1984, his business was struggling and he faced a lawsuit from client Michael Stroll over lost money, $450K, in an oil deal. Epstein won the lawsuit, and there's a quote from Barry Levine, a quote from The Spider by Barry Levine. As in many legal entanglements to come, Epstein, who won the lawsuit, proved that if you were steadfast, clever, and arrogant, you could stay above the law. It was around this time, on a vacation at Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, Epstein met a 13-year-old girl identified only as Jane Doe 4 in court papers filed in 2019. The girl was the daughter of a woman whom Epstein had rented a beach house from. Jane Doe 4 routinely worked as a babysitter for vacationing couples and thought nothing of it when Epstein hired her. But Epstein had no children, of course, and when the girl arrived at the house, he offered Jane Doe 4 alcohol and drugs, and Epstein raped her that night. So this is the first documented case of Epstein's behavior around children.
This was the very first, let's say, crime, well, non-financial crime that I could find that is alleged that he committed, which is, I mean, obviously fully believable.
Given his later track record, pretty substantial,
Yeah.
So the abuse carried on for years. Epstein flew the girl across state lines to New York on 3 or 4 occasions, according to court filings, to offer the young woman as fresh meat to a circle of male friends. The lawsuit contains disturbing depictions of how Doe was raped and beaten by this group of Epstein's friends, who were not identified. And then there's another quote from The Spider again. By his 31st birthday, Jeffrey Epstein seemed to have turned a fateful corner into his life of outright deviancy. But he had seemingly also learned that there were 2 kinds of people in the world: those who could make a fuss about his actions, like Michael Stroll, and those who could be compelled into silence, like Jane Doe 4. And towards the end of 1984, I believe here, Epstein started consulting for governments and individuals needing to relocate embezzled funds, often in offshore accounts, and he leveraged those connections to high-profile arms dealers Douglas Leese and Adnan Khashoggi, engaging in complex financial dealings.
So his reach was becoming international and taking in all manners of individuals, especially in like the arms dealing world and stuff like that. And that's kind of a conspiracy surrounds that. He may have been involved in intelligence agencies at this time as well. We'll go into more detail about that down the line. But with the amount of people he was meeting and the amount of high-profile individuals and their positions in the international kind of scene, it's posited that he was involved in intelligence gathering for government organizations, which is entirely possible. So this was a very formative year, a very important year in the life of Epstein. This is when he committed his first crime, but it's also when he started to when he started to kind of branch out into the wider net of ultra wealthy people.
I also think his specific manner of how he attacked that girl kind of indicates that there was a previous history of it. I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
because,
that sounds like it.
The way he did it too, he hired a babysitter to come over. For one, aside from being horrifically evil, is a level of normalcy almost, right? Oh, I know where I can find a young girl. They'll be babysitting, It's just,
it was this level of premeditation that kind of implies previous situations.
Yeah, and at least by 1984, we know it was happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely this is the first documented case, the first allegation of this, but I mean, I don't think that this just came out of nowhere. I don't think that this was his first actual case of abuse. I think he was probably likely before this many years beforehand.
So in 1987, Epstein was introduced to Stephen Hoffenberg and joined Towers Financial Corporation, eventually becoming involved in a massive Ponzi scheme. Around this time, Epstein stated to some people that he was an intelligence agent. He possessed an Austrian passport that had his photo, but with a false name. A note is that prosecutors later alleged that between 1988 and 1993, Towers Financial defrauded investors over $460 million. The scheme involved selling bogus investments and using new investor money to pay off returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of profitability. Epstein's role in the scheme is disputed. Hoffenberg claims Epstein was the master architect, manipulating financial reports and orchestrating investor relations. Epstein denied any wrongdoing and was never charged.
Everywhere he goes with these companies, he's embroiled in these giant financial conspiracies and like lawsuits and stuff. It's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy because obviously the upper elite of New York at the time were highly connected and they probably all schemed together. But it's just crazy. It's like how CEOs constantly fail upwards now, Charlie. Like we always talk about that on the official podcast and stuff. Like once you get to a certain level, there's no failing. You just keep going up. And it seems like that was the case with Epstein as well. Like, no matter what legal situation he found himself in, or no matter what conspiracy he found himself in, he just constantly kept getting opportunities, positions of power, and stuff like that. And that's just the world it was at the time, I guess. And
that just seems to be the case forever.
Yeah.
Like, if you amass that kind of power at any point, it seems like you always keep it and will only keep going upwards from it. Like, he's been caught now twice involved in these financial crimes, and yet he keeps getting more opportunities to do them down the line. It's wild.
Yeah. And then, if you want to read this, Isaiah, the second note.
Yeah, so in 2017, when questioned about his part in Epstein's leading at 2008 conviction, the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, Alexander Acosta, was reportedly told to back off with claims that Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence and was, quote, above his pay grade. So this theory comes up a lot, especially with his death, but there's a lot of people who believe that if not a direct intelligence agent, Epstein was at least some kind of informant for dealings happening in New York or whatnot.
Or even like I previously said, like he had relationships with overseas arms dealers. It's entirely believable to me, at least, that he was in cahoots, let's say, with intelligence agencies, whether foreign or domestic. I don't know, but like I fully believe that he was intelligence, or at least semi-intelligence.
Another thing to keep in mind, a lot of people hear that and they think like, oh, okay, so was he not guilty of some stuff? Did he not? But just because you like give information to governments does not make you a good person by any means. That both can be true at the same time.
I don't think they had he didn't have the official blessing from the agencies to do what he was doing. He was just a valuable asset, I would guess, because of his relation to arms dealers.
Yeah. And so that's kind of crazy to me that a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, like, put on the record, came out and said that he belonged to intelligence and was above his pay grade. So, I mean,
welcome. We've been expecting you.
It's all here.
Cowards.
Love.
And when it's being said by officials like that, like in an open setting, then it does lead a lot of credibility to the idea, at least. And then in 1989, Epstein gains power of attorney over one of his biggest clients, Leslie Wexner, and his finances. Wexner was the founder of L Brands, which I believe is like the Limited, Victoria's Secret, and Bath and Body and stuff like that. Like a bunch of companies under that one brand. So he had power of attorney. Now, can someone tell me what power of attorney actually gives you? As far as I know, it's like the biggest thing ever. Like that's massive.
So, as I understand it, and maybe you'll know more about this than I do, Isaiah, if you're given power of attorney, you can sign for them, you can negotiate on their behalf in an official capacity. Basically, you can operate autonomously under them because you've been given that right. At least that's how I understand it. I think the biggest thing you can do with power of attorney is actually sign on behalf of your client.
Right. So you're basically like their official lawyer, maybe?
So
no, it's more than that. You can do that for like deals outside of legal deals. Like if L Brands wanted to make some kind of like collaborative move. I guess if you're given power of attorney, you can be the one to sign off on it. I think that's how it works.
Right.
I can double check.
Because I mean that does make sense, because the most I usually hear about power of attorney is when someone is like in a position where they can't, make executive decisions for themselves. If they've lost the capability to make decisions, then power of attorney is signed over. In this case, it's kind of like really weird. This guy was Leslie Wexner was kind of like at the height of his power, and he signs over power of attorney to Epstein. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, so it can mean basically what y'all are saying about it gives you power in legal sense is like the sense most people hear power of attorney is when someone's on life support.
Yeah,
like
stuff
typically
like that.
your spouse will have power of attorney to take you off or whatever. With businesses, it basically means that Epstein now has the ability to make business decisions or sign whatever he wants on behalf of them. I don't know if it's saying here that Leslie Wexner lost a dispute and the power of attorney went to Epstein, or if he willingly gave it over, or what.
Pretty sure it's willingly.
It pretty much says that, at least in the sense of signatures, making decisions, Epstein effectively has an equal level of control of the company. So
yeah,
that's a pretty big thing. That when you imagine he was the guy to make decisions for Bath and Body Works and Victoria's Secret,
Victoria's
and all that,
Secret, yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge position.
I mean, it shows their connection. I fully believe personally that Leslie Wexner was likely just as involved in Epstein's schemes if he was giving him this much power and money and stuff like that.
Not to put the cart before the horse, because I know we'll talk about it later, but one of the big claims about Epstein is blackmail. That he would do all these things to get a bunch of blackmail on these very wealthy, powerful people for his own gain. To me, this seems like the first instance of this, where he may have had some really heavy blackmail on L. Brand's Wexner here, and eventually leverage that to get this power of attorney over L. Brand's, because that is a huge deal. I looked it up just to double check. And for business, when you're granted power of attorney, it's a document that allows you to grant permission to a person to receive confidential information, represent your business before the Franchise Tax Board, and act on its behalf. So pretty much, he is L. Brands at that point. Can be, for that matter.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is a crazy amount of power that I just could not see a corporation or a corporate individual signing over that power willingly if there wasn't some kind of coercive element to it. I really just couldn't.
Is there also, to kind of play devil's advocate, I think what Charlie said is more likely that it was a blackmail scenario, but is it also possible that maybe Epstein was doing so well with the finances that Leslie was like, well, if I just give you power of attorney, you can make, financial decisions yourself.
But he could make those financial decisions and advice without directly
consoling him. It's less likely. I'm mostly asking that if, in the sense that maybe he was so good at what he did that was kind of the inception of him getting away with a lot of stuff. A bunch of people kind of saw it as well, I don't want to go against my bank account, right? But yeah, what Charlie said is more likely, I think, that it was blackmail.
Either way, it either shows coercive element with Leslie Wexner or Leslie Wexner having just an...
Ever since I tried Hidden Valley Ranch, I finally found what I've been looking for.
We heard of Wexner before.
An incredible amount of trust in Epstein.
He looks familiar.
Whether through shared experiences or a fondness for the activities they would do and stuff like that. I definitely think this incriminates Leslie Wexner. Honestly, either way, he's got something dirty out there.
In Minecraft, yeah.
He's got something some blackmail on him through Epstein, and or he still was just really close friends with him and did those things. And there's also some interesting information about Leslie Wexner as well. He's been accused of ignoring reports from L. Brand's executives, so other executives within the company, that Epstein was abusing his connection to Wexner by posing as a recruiter of Victoria's Secret models. Epstein would go around pretending to be a recruiter of Victoria's Secret models and do one-on-one interviews with them and stuff like that. So there has been accusations that he abused his position in that regard. And also, and obviously that was ignored by Wexner, because Wexner and Epstein were connected from the 1980s all the way up until his arrest in 2007. So no amount of reporting or anything like that did anything to change.
Wexner got arrested in 2007. What for?
No, Epstein got arrested, I believe.
Oh, his 07 arrest. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's when what's his name, Wexner, kind of like
Okay,
dipped
I see
from
what you're
the
saying.
scene. Yeah. Wexner also sold Epstein his New York property, and in July 1991, he also, in addition to granting Epstein power of attorney, he also added him as a trustee onto the board of the Wexner Foundation. So he was putting Epstein in all of his places. He was putting him in power of attorney, onto the board. He was putting him in his fucking New York properties and stuff like that. Like, Wexner was potentially the biggest Epstein fanboy of all time. Like, I could not see anyone in the history of Epstein that like was more connected to Epstein than Wexner.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
Wexner appears in the Epstein documents, like all the documents that come out. Wexner is in there in a big capacity.
Yeah, real upstanding citizen. Yeah.
I fully believe that to some degree, to a massive degree, Wexner kind of gave Epstein the power and the ability to do these things that he did. So in 1990, Epstein, after becoming financially stable because of controlling Wexner's kind of fortune, he purchased a mansion in Palm Beach, Florida. This would become his primary residence and is where many cases of abuse and trafficking would take place. So this was the big one. This was the big mansion that everyone probably knows about, other than his island. He owned a mansion in Palm Beach, and this would become his primary place of residence. Let's shift gears a bit from Epstein, because I don't think you can talk about Epstein really without talking about his other biggest connection in his life, which was just...
I would hate living there. One, the whole backyard looks like fucking concrete or some shit. Two, well, that's pretty much it. The whole backyard's fucking concrete. Like, where's the grass? That property don't look too big, like the house. It's probably bigger than than it looks right now. Cause this is a big fucking distance away.
Lane Maxwell. Did you guys want to start?
Okay, this is where we're ending the video. My phone's at 10%. I don't know if it still records when it says like the fucking 10%, 20%, or if it's just like a blurry screen like it is for me.